The meeting to order, and I would like to welcome the audience. We're pleased to have everyone here that's with us tonight. If you have a cell phone or electronic device, especially board members, please silence those. And I don't think I did that either. And tonight's board meeting is being live streamed on Ukiah Unified's YouTube channel. The link is accessible on our website. Trustees, be sure you have your microphones turned on. If there's an audience member who wishes to address the board, please fill out a public comment form and present it to our executive assistant over here, Debbie Ornelas, prior to the beginning of public comment. Public comment is taken for items not on the agenda. Each speaker is given 5 minutes. Public comment for items on the agenda is taken at the time of the item, and each speaker there is also given 5 minutes. Okay. Tonight, we would like to welcome a couple of people new to our group. First of all, I would like to welcome and recognize Matt Brown, who is our new transportation supervisor. And we're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Good. Okay.
I've met a lot of nice people since I've been here, so it's a good thing.
Great. Thank you. And also, we have a new board representative. Tonight, we have Alexis Saunders from Ukiah High, and welcome,
Thank you.
Alexis.
Thank you.
What's it?
I also wanted to introduce Eddie Bedolla, who is our Title VI, it's Title VI now, Native American Family Community Liaison. So, and he's going to be part of a team. We will bring our new school resource officer next time, so you can meet her, and part of our greater team working on support for kids. So.
Okay. And I was going to say that about Mr. Bedolla. That's okay. As I ask him if he would lead us in the flag salute. Thank you, Eddie. He probably did that in my classroom many times. Oh, okay. We have a report out from closed session.
On item B7, the board approved a certificated leave of absence request. It was approved by roll call vote, 6-0. Absent was trustee Mulgard. And then on item B8, the board approved a classified leave of absence request. That was also approved via roll call vote, 6-0. Absent was trustee Mulgard.
Thank you. At this point, we need to have approval of the agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
I so move.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The agenda is approved. Alexis, we're going to let you begin. If you would like to share with us something about what's going on at Ukiah High.
Alrighty. So my name is Alexis. I'm a senior at the high school this year, and I've been in the district basically my whole life. From kindergarten to third grade, I went to Ukiah, and then I moved out of state for a few years, and I came back to Ukiah for middle school, and I went to Pomalita, and now I'm at the high school. I'm a president of 2 clubs this year. I played 2 years of varsity volleyball, but I'm not playing this year. I competed in track and field a few years ago, and this is my second year in leadership. All 4 years I've had a 4.0 or higher, and this year I'm in 4 AP classes and leadership and then another academic class. After high school, I want to go to Cal Poly and study environmental engineering. So that's my ideal plan, and I'm really excited to be the rep to the board. I feel like it's a good way to be involved. So school activities since the school year began, senior sunrise was the first Friday of the school year, and after the sun finally decided to rise, it was really fun. We had our first student council meeting the second week of school, and that's when we voted on our homecoming theme. So we decided that the theme would be cartoons. The seniors are black, and the cartoon is Scooby-Doo. The juniors are pink, the cartoon is SpongeBob. The sophomores are orange, and the cartoon is Flintstones. The freshmen are white, and the cartoon is Jetsons. Homecoming is October 16th through the 20th, and the senior class still needs a warehouse, so contact me if you have one. We had our back-to-school dance last Friday. It was purple and gold themed, so everybody dressed up in purple and gold. And it was pretty successful. It's the first one that we've had since I've been in high school. So I think that just because it was a first-time thing, it wasn't as successful as other dances. But I think we'll continue to do that in the future. Also, last Friday was Clubs Day, the first one of the year, and the most successful club raised more than $400. So it was a pretty good Clubs Day. There's a lot of clubs involved. We almost didn't have enough tables, so it was good. The first rally of the year is going to be Friday, September 22nd, and that'll be during lunch, just a normal rally, kind of beginning of the year thing. And that's about it for school activities, but I did want to bring up a kind of lengthy thing about something that I've been thinking about for a couple years. So last year, for those of you who don't know, there was a really bad accident on Despina, and a girl was quite nearly killed because she was hit by a car. And the main cause of this was that people park in the red zone on Despina, right by where the entrance to the parking lot is. And so it's really hard to see for both drivers and pedestrians oncoming traffic, because you have to pull out and you have to look around, and by the time you can finally see the traffic, they're basically right there. So this is still happening. People are still parking in the red zone, and it's just really frustrating to me that somebody almost died and people still aren't learning. So I think that a possible solution for this would be to have at least one campus supervisor just standing out on the curb and enforcing parents to not park there. I've seen supervisors out there in the past, and it worked for the first couple days that people were stopping completely at the stop sign, first of all, and people weren't parking right next to the entrance. But this school year, on one occasion, I saw a campus supervisor not do anything when a parent parked in the red zone right in front of them. They just stood there and almost acted like they didn't see it, and so that was really frustrating for me, because I feel like campus supervisors are there to ensure our safety and, in a way, enforce the law. So I feel like we need to kind of step that up a little bit. Another thing related to this, I know that it's really unlikely for more crosswalks to be added to Despina. That's a really big process. But I think that we can overall make it more safe for pedestrians if we were to have 1 or 2 campus supervisors at the crosswalks that do exist, and have them act basically as crossing guards, and have maybe a stop sign and a reflective vest, and just help students maybe cross in groups and make sure that traffic actually stops, because I drive up and down Despina every day because I live right around the corner from the high school, and countless occasions I've seen cars just drive through crosswalks with students still in them. And I've seen students jaywalking, and that's especially dangerous. And so it's just a very chaotic 2-minute drive from my house to the school, and from the school to my house, because I'm really paranoid of people running out and of cars not paying attention and pulling out. And I think that there was another accident a few weeks ago with a T-boning incident on maybe Caps and Despina intersection, or Empire and Despina. So just overall, it's really chaotic. So yeah, just another solution for that overall is just having more campus security out there and present, because I have seen campus security guards out standing on the corner of Caps and Despina, but they're not active in the crossing of students. They're not really paying attention. They're more just standing at the corner in the shade, hanging out, not really doing much. And the last thing is the parking lot. It's really chaotic, and I feel like it's really unsafe, and I honestly hate parking in it, and I hate driving in it, and if I was walking in it, I would feel really unsafe. Based on personal experiences, I just don't think that there's enough supervision overall. I feel like we need a couple campus security patrolling the parking lot at all times, and not just standing in one spot, but patrolling and making sure that everybody's driving safe, and that everybody feels safe, and that everybody's just acting like mature teenagers, because we can be mature sometimes. And parents too. Parents actually drive really unsafely in the parking lot. People will speed past lines of cars, and they'll drive between parked cars and lines of cars waiting to get out of the parking lot, or they'll just drive through empty parking spaces and avoid the speed bumps and drive way faster than they should. And I just feel like that's really dangerous for any cars driving and trying to pull out, and also for pedestrians trying to get to their cars. So it happens literally every day, because I drive to school and I'm always in the parking lot as the big rush is getting out and getting in, and I have come really close to being in minor accidents in the parking lot because of other people driving unsafely and cutting people off. And they'll just drive straight up to the very front of the line and force their way into the main line to get out, because they'll get so close to the other car that the other car has to back off and let them in. They'll basically intimidate them into letting them in. And there's a certain section of the parking lot that it seems like no matter what time of day, what day it is, or how many trash cans there are there, there's always an incredibly large amount of garbage in that exact spot, more so than any other spot in the parking lot. And it seems like it's always the same 5 to 10 cars that are parking there. And it's been like that since I started driving. I have known that exact spot to be like that. There's KFC bags, pizza boxes, all the fast food garbage, and then also bottles of tobacco spit. So it's really disgusting. And I've been out there as a part of leadership cleaning up the parking lots, picking up the parking lots and picking up garbage for service hours and stuff, and it's repulsive being in that area especially. So I feel like it's really obvious who's creating that mess, but nothing's being done about it, because it's been 3 years that I've had my license and been driving in that in the parking lot, and it hasn't been resolved. So I think one of the reasons that it hasn't really been dealt with is because I've noticed that the supervisors, some of them are friends with these students, and I've seen them like hanging out with them and kind of just talking and chit-chatting while standing around the garbage that is all there. And these kids are still driving over the center dividers and speeding through the lanes, and the campus supervisors are blind to it somehow. So it's just really concerning and really frustrating for me that that's happening. I know that we have enough campus security guards. We have 4 to 5 campus security, 4 to 5 academic and guidance counselors, and at least 2 assistant principals, maybe 3, and then of course Mr. Osland. And I've seen all of them patrolling the main part of the campus with walkie-talkies and always in communication and enforcing the rules and stuff. So I feel like that needs to be shifted over to the parking lot in the mornings and afternoons, and even during lunch, because obviously that's when all the food is coming in. And just ensuring that the students and the parents are acting responsibly, and that they feel safe and that they're acting safe. Because I feel like that's campus supervisor's job. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for your comments about safety, particularly, and bringing that to our attention. And be sure that Mr. Osland is aware of these areas. I'm sure he would like to know about them, and especially comments about staff. It would be good if it went to Mr. Oslin. Okay, thank you. Do we have public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay. So next we have CSEA report. Stephanie?
Good evening, Deb and board members. So CSEA is currently working on our nomination.
Stephanie, maybe you could get a little closer to the microphone.
CSEA is currently working on our nomination to the Personnel Commission Board, as our current commissioner's term expires November 30th. So we will be bringing our nomination to the board at the October board meeting. We do not have much else to report on, as our second meeting of the year is next Thursday on September 21st. And so, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Now, next we have the UTA report. Terry?
Hi. Thank you very much. I also have a brief report. I know that all of the teachers that are in our unit are really excited to teach, shape, collaborate with students and teachers this year. We have over 50 new teachers, amazingly. And our e-board is going to meet with them individually or in small groups just to see how we can best meet their needs and to let them know that we're there. We're almost finished working on our UTA bylaws and our standing rules, which is really exciting because I don't know the last time that had been done. And those will go to vote with the members in a couple of months. Our first rep council meeting was this past Tuesday, and there was no shortage of topics. We're looking forward to the unaudited actuals tonight to be discussed with the FIT team and putting our negotiation team together for the school year. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our leadership team report. I take that Mr. Osland is here to represent leadership tonight.
I'm here to represent leadership and also to talk about good things at the high school, and I love a challenge, and so I look forward to our meeting. I was going to stand up here and talk about how the cockroach population had been reduced to 10% of what it was, and then now we have a whole brand new thing to deal with, and we're live broadcast, so I appreciate that. And let that be a warning to all the people driving over the barriers out there. So leadership team, district-wide leadership team, we have a book, Visible Learning, that you may have seen. You may even have copies. And so each of the different sites are doing a book study and working through PLCs with really a description of learning in there of the cycle from going from surface learning to deeper learning to the transfer of learning, which is really applying learning. And at the high school, that is our focus. And in particular, we're focusing on math this year. As a whole staff, when we get together, we actually do math problems. That's pretty exciting, actually, to watch all these teachers. We had an English teacher that actually said, "I'm just not doing this. I'm not up for math today." And it sounded a lot like a high school sophomore. And she knows who she is, live broadcast tonight. But our point is that we see growth on SPAC and English. We don't see growth necessarily. We did see a little bit in math, but the language is tough. And so part of it is that we work collectively on the language arts, and now we're working collectively with math. In individual PLCs, they're working through that book as well. And then the other thing throughout the district that we're doing is learning rounds and really trying to reinvest in that. Pomalita has a couple, 3 years of experience with that, and then other sites do as well. And those of us that hadn't initiated that is what we're doing. The things that are going well, I wanted to talk about. We had a workshop at the beginning. The high school staff is a tough audience, and they had a social emotional learning workshop at the beginning that had the best reviews I've seen with the staff. And let me tell you, if you're working an audience, it's a tough crew to work. And it was excellent. It was interesting to watch how much of it came out of that 3-hour workshop that I saw in classrooms coming right back in, as well as individuals that had been to EL things over the summer, changed their practices and their furniture in the classroom. And so if you ever wonder whether it works or not, it's not instantaneous, but that was a quick reaction on their part. Other things going well, the special education staffing in our hires this year is phenomenal. We hired a total of 16 people, 17 to the new to the high school, 16 from outside of the district. Many of those are special ed, and that is a real celebration for us. You've invested heavily in band, and second day of school I walked into advanced band, and we're approaching 50 members of that band. And that is right on target of being able to build a big sound. And so that is very, very exciting. And then there's a new state measurement that is adding, in addition, and you'll hear more about it, adding to the A through G, or the four-year bound college movement. They're really starting to hammer away at CTE. And that was actually at the high school, our WASC goal, married A through G and CTE completion in one bundle. And then the state, a couple of years later, actually adopted that. For A through G, you've heard the number before, and last year, 2 years ago, the last official number released was 35%, and that's the highest since 1999. The exciting part, and I can give you lots of data on that, Katie may comment on it a little bit, but the exciting part is that all the subgroups are pushing ahead and they're not losing pace off to the front end of that. And to have a high school in a community where it's the best you've seen since 1999, people should just say that over and over again. And it takes a lot of work on a lot of parts. Our summer academy is the beginning of that journey, and we had more students this year than we've ever had. We had 160 join us this year for that 2-week academy. And the end of the journey really is represented by AP tests. And I get a number of questions about, pass rates and things like that. We've grown our participation of students and the number of tests by 15% in the last 3 years. And the pass rate overall is 79%. We've grown 15%, and we've only lost 4% in pass rate. And if you really want to compliment somebody, run over to Spanish, 95% pass rate on 100 tests. And then calculus, very phenomenal numbers. You've also invested heavily in CTE, the Career Technical Education shop classes, through the work of Eric Crawford, CTE coordinator. The amount of work in there is phenomenal, and you timed it just right because it is part of the state measuring system. And our whole deal is right student, right class. Things we've done that I think make a huge difference in shop classes where safety is concerned. We've capped the number at 24 students, and that's huge because they can actually learn and they're safe. We currently have 1,250 student enrollments in those CTE classes, which is up. Several years ago, we had empty slots. If you think like an airline, we do not have a lot of available seats. And we've increased our staffing by 3.5 in career technical education. And we use career inventory. We're getting ready for next year's scheduling. Within the next 6 weeks, we'll be working with kids to figure out how to better place them. And that's our mission, is right kid, right class. And so there's quite a bit going on in that. Superstars within CTE, I would point to health-related. We've gone from 1 teacher and 68 students 4 years ago to 4 teachers teaching about 2.5 teaching positions. That 68 kids is now more than 300 students from 2 subjects to 5 subjects. And that is absolutely huge. Computers, we just added an AP computer science class and a network security class, and that'll help Jason Griswold a lot into the future. And then the last program that I'll comment on is our ag program. We hired another ag teacher, and she has opened a welding class, which allows for welders and ag mechanics to be part of FFA. And if you caught the story in the Ukiah Daily Journal, we had 26 students showing animals, raising more than $50,000. And among the awards was Ukiah High School graduate and now FFA advisor, Ms. DeMarta, who was the advisor of the year for Mendocino County. And so all of that is fantastic news, and I appreciate your investment in that. And finally, I'll circle back, not to the parking lot, but rather to your comment on the Clubs Day, and say that this is a phenomenal Clubs Day this year. And to be out there, and it was a dueling line between the Native American Club and the Club Latino for Indian tacos or straight-up old-fashioned tacos. And all of it was awesome and amazing. And I do look forward to the meeting and addressing that problem, because I'll take any challenge any day to make Ukiah High School better. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next we have the acceptance of donations. And this month, we have a donation to elementary and middle school garden programs in the amount of $40. It's cucumber plants for all the elementary and middle schools. And then we have a donation to Ukiah School for $1,000 for teacher supplies and sandwich board. Not exactly what that's about, but be interesting to see. So we need a motion to accept these donations.
I move acceptance of the donations with gratitude.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of accepting these donations?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you. All right, next we have Penny Lossing, who's going to explain everything we need to know about unaudited actuals.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm pleased to present the 16-17 unaudited actuals financial report for you tonight. And several items on our agenda. Rather than going over it, we'll just get right into it. Here's our usual budget cycle, reporting cycle. Actually, I do need to I do need to stop here at the agenda because I wanted to acknowledge our fiscal department and thank them. They really prepare the report and do all of our detail work on our budget throughout the year. As we know, it's constantly changing, both revenue and expenses. And they're very good at their jobs, very accurate, led by our own Katie Aguilar. So I just wanted to be sure and acknowledge them and tell you how much I appreciate them. Our budget cycle, the way this works is each color indicates a different year. So if we start at the top, if you recall, we adopted this year's budget, 17-18's budget in June. It was effective July 1st, and our fiscal year goes through June 30th. And now we're looking at having closed the books for last year. These are the actual report. No more changes, this is it, unless our auditors find some type of a material difference, then we would have an audit adjustment. But barring that, that's not typical. These are our actuals for last year. Then we continue through the year on this year's budget, making adjustments, the December and March reports to you. But starting in January of 2018, we'll be looking ahead to next year. So we really always do have 3 years within the year just to make it simple for us. So here is our unrestricted general fund. And I've highlighted the column in yellow of what we're looking at, because what we're going to be comparing is our estimated actuals. The last budget you approved for 16-17 was the estimated actuals in June, and that was adopted along with this year's 17-18 budget. So that was the last budget that we'd seen, and now after we've closed the books, this is the actual. So as you can see, according to this, the ending fund balance was incredibly close. But I put the two bubbles in there to explain that due to our board policy on reserves, where we're working toward the goal of the 9%, we had interpreted that to take that 50% of the ending fund balance and moving it to our reserve fund 17 as we closed the books to show that. And that was the board's wise decision in being able to increase our reserve without necessarily impacting any current year budget, because we were doing it at the end of the year with any extra budget that we had. And that extra budget occurs because we may have revenues that we receive more or less of. There's, literally thousands of account code lines, and they don't always get fully spent out, but we don't ever know which ones they are, so there'll be that budget savings each year. And then if there's expenditures that are, or services, products or services that are received or finished after June 30th, then they're automatically moved to the current year, and so that would leave budget in the prior year. So that's part of the reason there can be variances. And so I tried to explain here that if we had not moved the half of that ending fund balance, then we would have actually had an unallocated ending balance of the 2,639,244, which would have equaled about a 2.25% variance, which is very accurate. That really is, the closest, almost the closest you could hope to expect. Do you have a question?
Possibly this will be explained in a future slide, but is the 1.2 million that was moved into Reserve Fund 17 show up on these totals in the expenditure lines somewhere? Or is it the other sources uses?
Yeah, it's part of that. And I can show you in another, there had been a question about the difference, the 1380 is not half of the 1259, but that's because when you look at the full detail, this is a summarized version of the unrestricted, and it did not, when it shows the ending balance, it does not detail these components of the ending fund balance. Because if you'll recall, there are always the unspendable components of the ending fund balance, like our revolving cash that we're not allowed to spend, and then things that are stores that are basically inventory that we count in our warehouse. And then we had prepaid expenditures, and then we had assigned a piece of that ending fund balance for assessment testing that will be carried over to the new year. And so of that 1.380 million, the 121,000 is non-spendable, which gives us the other half back to the 1.259. So that was just a little bit more detail to explain why it wasn't an exact 50%. Okay, so here's the restricted general fund, and just again, very summarized. It ends up with a ending balance of 4.569, and I put total required reserve because in our general fund, restricted balances are, we're not allowed to spend them on anything other than the programs that they're meant for. And so of that 4.5 million, I've detailed in the box on the right what comprises that 4.5. And so it's probably familiar programs for you until we get to the other restricted local, and that's 2.9 million. And so I went ahead and detailed what comprises that amount. And this is, I did this similar information last year at unaudited actual. So that the 2.9 is comprised of all of these locally defined restricted resources. I had noticed Ukiah High School has a 81,000. There was a 30-something thousand, I believe, are the grapes from the ag departments selling grapes. And so there's a variety of things that each individual school will have locally restricted money for. That was just an example, something that I looked up. The blue highlights are those board-determined, locally restricted for ongoing expenses that we know we have, and for ease of tracking. We keep them here, but I like to be sure they're fully disclosed in a very transparent manner, and that's why I went ahead and highlighted those. Of note, 9527 resource, the technology infrastructure set aside that's been sitting there now for a couple of years, the 800,000. If you'll recall, we had a change in the contract with AT&T. They did not complete that work in a timely manner, so we had to go back and rebid it. It came in much lower. So we're expecting a savings of over $500,000 there. It's just that we had to reapply for our E-rate funding, and we won't know for sure that we've been approved until later this fall, sometime in October. But once we know that, then we'll know that we can apply that to our lower bid, the other two companies that'll be doing the fiber optics and the cabling and the equipment portion. And so we'll be able to then release that money. So I wanted to disclose that as well. And that's also noted in the executive summary on this particular information page. It's an attachment to the executive summary. And
President Barrett, can I just ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
So I can just be really clear here to myself. On the blue highlighted items are items that we, the board, said set aside this money for this.
Right, and we set aside $300,000 each year for deferred maintenance, because you recall the state no longer provides any separate money for that. It's all up to us to fund that. And then textbooks, because we have our textbook purchasing plan, that multi-year plan, and we're still short money on that.
But these are decisions that we made and money that we didn't end up spending.
Well, we're, like the textbooks, we have a plan for that, right. And then the technology infrastructure, at one
one
point
you
we
explained,
thought it would be,
right.
we had a contract for that amount. But then when AT&T, actually did us a favor by not completing it, because then it was much cheaper when we went to bid again, and different companies were then, there was some change in the way it was allowed to be bid, maybe, I don't recall the details, but it was a huge savings for the school district. Good
Is the
stuff.
Redwood Valley Outdoor Project funding that they've raised, or is it contributions we made to that project that were not?
No, this is theirs.
Their funding? And Microsoft for $228,000?
It's been a while since that's the old, it's like a settlement.
Microsoft settlement money that we've used over the years on technology, basically.
Right, it's
equipment.
restricted use.
And we get money each year. I think we did get some last year, and it's to be used for technology specifically.
And the after-school program, that's funding we didn't spend on the after-school program?
I don't know the details of that. Could certainly send it to you.
And, sorry.
That's okay.
But on the other column, the routine restricted maintenance, is that a balance that we're required to leave there, or that we pull from every year? I can't remember on that one.
The amount of carryover is there. There are, I pulled the details, there are several projects that didn't end by June 30th that we're going to be paying for out of that carryover. when like the adult school roof. Dave probably knows, but there's several, but there was additional money there that we'll be planning to spend, because what doesn't get spent has to be carried over and maintained for routine restricted maintenance.
Okay. All right, thanks.
There's a little more on that in another slide on the contribution, because it comes in.
Can I get some more clarification?
Sure.
I was just surprised by that Redwood Valley Outdoor Project money, because what is that what is that used for, since we're paying for the entire salary and the paraprofessional for that project, are we not?
Yes, we are paying for the salary.
And I thought the
They-
reason we
They
were.
still do fundraising, though, for projects out at the outdoor ed program. I can't specifically say what they are. I don't know if, Katie, you know some more detail, but they still get donations from people who love that project. And it's to go toward other expenses.
I would just be curious at some point to know.
That amount is, I believe, quite a bit more than it has been. So there must have been some kind of revenue donation type coming in.
I do believe they pay for all the buses.
That's true, I know that, and I have no idea how much.
Katie has some info.
Oh.
Oh, she still is carrying on even though we did it up. She didn't stop after all. But that's great.
Okay, so, there's the routine restricted maintenance carryover, was a 778,000. And there was quite a bit of that, not all of it, that is going to be paying for projects that weren't
underway.
finished by June 30th, yeah.
That were done over the summer.
And then we'll apply the rest of the carryover to this year and projects that we'll be able to do this year. Okay, so contributions from unrestricted to restricted. I thought that it would be a good idea to share with you where we contribute money. You know, there's just the two sides to the general fund, the unrestricted and the restricted. And so any restricted program that doesn't fully fund itself requires a contribution from the unrestricted side to balance, because we can't have it out of balance. The system doesn't work that way. And if you add that 7.8 to the
1.2.
you end up, wait a minute, you end up with that 10, the 7.8, and I didn't have my notes, and the 2.9. No. Oh, the transfer amount. Is that right? 7.8, and then the amount transferred equals the 10 million over here.
The 1 point, the half, the 50%.
See, on the other sources uses, the 10.191. It's almost to the bottom, and
Penny, you're
then,
kind of flipping back and forth
Right,
between slides.
right.
So can you tell them which
Okay.
slide you're on?
so right now, I'm talking about this number right here. It's the 1 point, well, it's the amount of the transfers, the 1.259 plus the 7.8 that equals that portion of the budget. There's a couple of other little transfers in there to make it balance. And there's detail on that too. But, so here we come to the combined general fund. So we looked at unrestricted, then we looked at restricted. We looked at some of the components that make them up, that make up those totals. And then this is the combined amounts. So our unassigned additional reserve is the 1.259, and adding that to the total amount in Fund 17 now gives us the 8.8% of our general fund, and Fund 17, we're at that percent of reserve, okay? Well, actually, it's 10.5, I'm sorry. We have 8.8 in Fund 17, and I broke that out specifically. You guys are not used to seeing the general fund percentage and the Fund 17 percentage, But I wanted to do that because when we adopted the 17-18 budget in June, the estimated actuals for 16-17 had about 1.2, 1.3 million unassigned. And as we built the 17-18 budget, that rolls over to the beginning fund balance for 17-18. And in this year, we've used all of that, plus we've had to move back 914,000 from Fund 17. So I thought it was important for you to see just the Fund 17 because we know that we're going to be using a portion of Fund 17 unless there's some changes that we're not aware of right now. We do have more students, so that will help. And of course, the budget will change before we look at it again. We'll take the next picture October 31st, prepare the report, and present it in December. Tyler?
So, when you say we're gonna use part of Fund 17 because we're spending too much money? Does that mean we're taking from that 3% state mandated to cover costs?
No. That's just a number that you determine what that 3% is, and that's just part of these percentages. That's
Okay,
just
so-
a number that we always have to determine what that amount is for the state.
We're spending, because we're spending more, we're gonna have less, so we don't have to have as much in Fund 17.
Yeah, we'll be moving some back over unless, as we do our budget adjustments, when we adopted the budget, you have to recall, we hired, at least 50 new teachers and whoever else estimating what their salaries will be. So we'll know now, we know what they are. We'll make those changes. And then if we know we have more students, so we'll, if we conservatively look at the prior year trends and then add students, that will increase our revenue. So there'll be adjustments made. It's just that, when we adopted this year's budget, right now, it uses all of the ending fund balance and then 914,000 from Fund 17. So I just wanted to make you aware of that because when it says additional reserve, it is unassigned, but this year's budget is using that. So I think if you recall last year when we got to first interim, the budget savings had been used too from last year's, quite a bit of the amount.
Quite a minute of the
Of the unassigned, yeah, the unallocated ending fund.
But we started the year with 1.3 of that, and we ended the year with 1.3 of that. So how
This
did we
year,
see-
right, and so the 17-18 budget is, it would automatically take the estimated actuals ending fund and make it the beginning fund, and so using that, we still have to pull from the reserves. You can see it probably on the SACS form, if you look at, in your packet. On, actually,
And just
It's
remember, that's
page
based on
5.
the budget assumptions right now.
No, I know.
Right.
And, that will get adjusted by first interim.
right.
But that's just looking at what it is right now.
Right. And so we always have to go by, our last most accurate report, and that's what it was.
I guess I'm thinking, though, that we started last year with 1.9 as a beginning balance. We ended the year with 1.9 as a beginning balance and added another 1.2 to Fund 17. So we didn't use up the unassigned.
Well, that was from an adopted budget, and then as the year played out, we ended up with more students, and we probably wouldn't have put those in the budget until P2, which I think was maybe even after second interim. I'm not sure if we captured it at second interim or not. So it's always changing.
And Megan, what we're looking at right now is just a budget report for the last 3 years and every resource, what was budgeted, what we spent, to see, are there any areas that we should be reducing? Because over 3 years, we haven't spent that money. And
That's what I was thinking was
that's
showing
what-
up in these reports now, but they're not yet.
no, that's what we're looking at to figure out, whatever the dollar amount is that we have to reduce. Last time in August, we talked about a target potentially of $900,000. That's not factoring any in new enrollment, any of the salary adjustments that we'll make. So that's what we're kind of looking at right now is, are there categories of funding that we haven't intentionally been saving, like textbooks, for example. We have been intentionally saving that because we have multiple adoptions coming up. But are there other categories that we're not intentionally saving that we have a pattern of not spending that we can just reduce?
For example, if we keep committing $100,000 to after-school tutoring and we keep only spending $50,000, I'm totally making up, there's no.
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
Then we'd say, we seem to only be
Yes.
spending $50,000 in after-school tutoring. Do we want to increase after-school tutoring or accept the fact that we're only spending $50,000 on it?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm looking at, 2 to 3 years of it because we wouldn't want to do it based on 1 year. We want to look at patterns
Right.
of underspending something. And we should, if we're doing that, we should permanently reduce it out of the budget in,
Or question
opinion.
why we're not spending the money
Yes.
if we should be.
yes. So
And-
that's the process that we're going through,
Okay.
right? I'm going through in fiscal.
Right.
Right now, just to see if there's anything that completely stands out as making logical sense to reduce.
And I think too, what's different about this year's unaudited actuals is that we're looking ahead because we've realized that our multi-year projections are using money from our reserves. So I'm talking to you about this year's budget, but we're looking at last year's closing. And so that's different this year than what we did last year. I mean, that's why it seems different to you, is part, maybe, if that's helpful. Okay, so this is how we calculated the reserves, and I wanted to do this just to be real transparent about the transfer. So on the left-hand side is the policy and how the board, I feel very wisely determined was a good way to handle trying to increase the reserve for things like, handling our pension increases that we're not even getting enough ongoing money to fund and things like that, being the reason why we want the 9% so that we can protect the programs we already have in place. And so this is basically how we calculate it. It's really Katie that did it, and then I went through and did the steps. And then we have another form that includes each of the numbers, where it originated from. So it's sort of like our formula. Betty Lamson suggested a schedule number for each number that was input, so that would be the backup. So we have another column that has where each of those numbers originate from. So if anybody wanted to follow it through, they can tie it all together. I don't recommend it, but it's there if anyone wants to. So some of the reason that maybe we are experiencing, the structural deficit is that we have some programs that aren't fully funded. It's not the program's fault. It's federal, state, whoever's providing the funding is not funding the programs as well as they should to cover the expenses. So this was like a multi-year look at our general fund special education program. And it kind of shows you the red line is additional expenses over the prior year. And you can see that this year we're looking at almost $850,000 more than last year in a contribution. And it looks like that's partially due to less revenue, but also definitely more expenses. So I just kind of wanted a little bit of why it seems that we're experiencing this, and it's also the increase in pension costs. This is every year, we have to look at other funds of the district, and so these are the balances. Excuse me. This, the estimated actuals was the last look you had, the unaudited. And then I thought, really, for comparison purposes, let's look at it year to year. So I put the ending fund balance from 15-16 comparing to the ending fund balance this year, so you can see over the year, what was the difference. And there you'll see their Fund 17 reserve, and nothing too terribly spectacular there. I don't have a lot of detail. I can always provide it if you would like. But these these are completely separate pots of money from our general fund. Funds 13, I thought, we would take a detailed look at least one of them. There was a bigger general fund contribution to the cafeteria this year, but a lot of that was due to the bad debt that we wrote off. As we start our new policy, people are going in with a clean slate, and we're going to expect them to not charge more than $50. But there was $59,000 of bad debt written off. So this is a multi-year look at that.
When you're referring to the bad debt, it's people that bought school lunches and didn't pay us for them.
Right.
Or charge.
And since we've instituted, our collection agency contract, we didn't feel it fair that them not knowing, what the criteria would be, that we could leave that, so. And then also the law is that you cannot, that the cafeteria fund cannot pay for bad debt. Their expenses are limited to just what we use it for. That would
I
be.
hate to be a stickler, but I know that when I incur debt, that I'm expected to pay it back.
Right.
And I'm disappointed in $59,000 of our.
I know, and that's why I think it was very prudent on the board's part to adopt the policy that we have in place now. And I think it'll serve us well to help that fund and not have other funds in the general fund suffer for it, or other programs. This is it may look familiar. Last year, basically, we talked about the minimum wage increase, that's the law, and then the pension cost increases. We are, still having time to plan, but the time is, it's incrementally increasing on the minimum wage, and you can see the impact. This is probably not the most current. I redid this slide with our more current salary schedule, and I couldn't find it, so I apologize for that. But I thought just giving you the general idea of where we are, the dates are color-coded to the portion of the salary schedule that'll be affected, and as these dates occur, it'll be against the law to pay less than the designated minimum or wage rate. So we're working on that in our negotiations. This is also the same slide. It is an example to show multi-years of those additional increases over just the commensurate amount. If there were salary increases, you would expect a certain amount, but these are over and above because of the changes in the state pension costs to all districts. So we come to finally, there's good news. And that is that this year, in the state enacted budget that the governor signed, there is $147 per average daily attendance of one-time money. And that comes to, we calculated it out based on, that exact number, which will change. But at that point, it was $818,000. And so with that, I wanted to note, here's that potential savings on the E-rate infrastructure under the green revenue. Then there's the $818,000 for one time that that's totals 1.395. And then I had left the to-be-determined budget savings at year end because I didn't really note that because, again, 17-18 budget at this point is using it. So it's not really, unless we see that there'll be unallocated money, like when we get to the first interim. I hope that makes sense. Expenses, these are just some examples of some things that are hanging out there. So we have that $1,000 in our textbook fund, or $1 million rather. Katie almost had a heart attack. It's a little over $1 million. However, according to our plan for textbook adoptions, we're about, and it could be more than this by now, it seems like every time it's more, but there's another $763,000 that we need for that to get us through the next couple of years. And then, you know, we have our Grace Hudson, I say HVAC replacement. I'm not really sure if it's HVAC or it's the central plant, the way they heat and cool. And then our unfunded deferred maintenance, that we did a lot of projects this summer. I mean, it was a lot going on, but there's still an awful lot out there. And I know that the community has been quite vocal about an artificial turf field. So I just put that in there as examples of needs, because we see the one-time money and then we see the amount of our need. And I just wish that were more. But getting the one-time money is really good stuff. So that brings us to what happens next. We've got our external auditors, as always, will come in and review and make sure these actuals are correct. And they'll have that report ready in December. Hopefully it's in time for you to get it, otherwise you'll get it in January. Then we're going to review one-time needs with administration and bring back a proposed plan for your review and approval. And then, as we talked about in August, staff and other stakeholders will brainstorm methods to reduce that structural deficit, which we know is changing, but we also don't have any budget if our formula, we did not budget if our formula does indicate that a raise is to occur. We did not have any budget for that in the 17-18 budget. So there's a lot of things to be determined. We will know that information by the end of October. Christy Bryant in accounting is working on it right now.
Is this what we would be usually calling the true up?
Yes, the true up for last year occurs on these actuals, so we have to get them prepared, and then we make the calculation based on the actual numbers. And so the 16-17 true up will be then added to what we estimate would be this year's. And you add that together and you get whatever, if anything, the amount will be. So we'll all hope that it's positive, but we don't know yet. So we'll see. And that pretty much is it. And so the recommendation would be to approve our 16-17 unaudited actuals.
Any further questions? Oh, Megan?
Thank you. I don't know if I have a question, but I have a proposal. I'm wondering if the board is interested in requesting that at first interim, we just make this the 9%. We're at 8.8%, and I would just as soon get to the 9%, lock it in so that we really can know where our line is and whether we're spending into what we don't want to spend in. Because I feel like we've been building that up. We're like $83,000 away.
Pretty
And
close.
so-
I know.
And so for me, it would be helpful to have that 9% in there, have it locked in there, because although I'm comfortable with the 9%, I'm not comfortable with not spending money beyond that. So I don't feel
Right.
that we need to have money beyond that, but when we're still trying to build it up, you can't really tell, like, okay, do we want to wait, blah, blah, blah. But I'd like to see a budget that is accurate and complete, and we can follow it and make sure that we're spending the money that we committed to spending and not going into that 9%. And if we are going into the 9%, that's the dollar amount I want to worry about. I don't really want to worry about other dollar amounts beyond that. But if it's like, yes, we are dipping in by 200,000, that's where the board needs to understand that. So I would recommend by the first interim, we just make it at the 9% and lock it in there and stop messing around with it.
We can do that. as long as the budget doesn't require us to shift some from Fund 17 back to balance the general fund, which is the multi-year.
I'd still like to see it that way, because then, rather, you're saying you're pulling 900,000 out of it, it would really be, you'd be pulling 983,000 out of it, right?
Well, but we can't have a negative general fund. See,
But what Megan is saying is she would like to know what it is so that we can make the
Oh.
appropriate reductions.
Okay.
And when we're just rolling it in, the board can't really see that. And so that's what I hear you saying, Megan, that you want it in there so that if we are dipping into it, we know how much it is. And we're
Correct.
not just automatically pulling it out to balance the budget.
I just feel like we're close. We have this
Right.
policy that makes it a little bit messy at the end of every year, and we might as well just finish it off.
I
You don't like it?
Yes, I understand that, but we would have to have that enough money to do that. Would be the only.
But, right,
So if we didn't,
then you would show that we are deficit in our 9%, not in our deficit
Yes.
Fund 17, we're deficit in our 9%
Right.
by whatever the amount really
okay,
is. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. It's just, okay. That makes sense. So exactly what the 9% is and then how much we're short. I
That's-
think I've
that's what I
shown
would
it that way
suggest.
before. Okay. Yeah, that works.
Tyler?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you want to pull $86,000 or whatever what it takes to get to that, pull it out, put it in the budget, so we're done. I guess my thought is, one thing that I've heard you and some of the other folks on the board is, when we have money, we want to spend it on the kids and put it towards the kids. And $86,000 with a $50 million budget is not a whole bunch of money, but it's still something that we can utilize towards the kids. And when Penny and her staff does do the budgeting, and they do a great job, I mean, we got within 2% this year. I'm not seeing the rush to solve that 9% issue, because we know we're not gonna be in the red at the end of the year, and we can just designate 50% or less towards that 9%. I'm not sure why the rush is there, when we can spend it on so many other things.
Well, we're not spending it right now. Right now, the way it's been left is, I understand the budget next year uses all of this and more, but I also know it's not going to be that way in first interim, and you're hinting at that. We all know that. It's not only that we have the 8.8% in there, we also have another 1.3 that Penny's saying of unassigned, just sitting out there, which Penny is saying in the current budget for next year, all of that plus 900,000 is being used. That's before we've done the ADA adjustment. That's before you've done this kind of budget look at that Deb is talking about. So I suspect at first interim, we're going to see that 900,000 not an issue. That's what I suspect. But we'll see. And I think for me, it's not, that was getting too long of a tangent. For me, Tyler, it's not about a rush, but when I as a board member look at this, I have to find where's my bottom line and what there's a lot of detail in here.
I know.
And I need to decide where are we holding the line on we want to spend this money, and where are we holding the line on where we want to save this money. And as we're still kind of psychologically trying to save money, it's harder to get that clarity. And we're so close right now that it felt like we could just lock in our 9%, pull it out of the 500,000 in technology, whatever. I mean, it's budget dust at this point. And then we have real clarity on what we want the district to be spending and what we want them to be saving. But I'm not attached either way. It just felt like we were almost done with this process, and we might as well finish it this year.
It would just be real clear if we did that. Then we could have the 9% in there and see what our multi-year projection
And then our
shows.
policy direction is over. You know, we got where we said we were going to go. But I mean, I'm not wedded to it. It just would be easier for me to know that we achieved that goal, and now we know what we're looking at moving forward. But again, I don't care either way.
I know that there's gonna be 2% or better left at the end of the year, that then we're gonna have to find a use for it, when we already have
When we should be using
Penny,
it.
would you
and we
bring
can put it
that
towards the end,
back
towards
in
something that we don't have
January
money
then?
for.
It'll be December.
In December?
Yeah, we
you'll
take the
bring that back?
picture of the budget October 31st, and we do all the create the report, and it gets presented to you in December. And that'll show a new, brand-new multi-year projection.
And then we can look at it at that time and make a
Yes.
decision. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Can I just one more question?
yes.
So I'm just going to ask again, I always sort of ask this when we are looking at, we have pots of money that are not spoken for, the one-time funds, the E-rate project savings.
Pretty much just those two.
Those two.
Yeah.
And what again is our decision-making process on that?
Go ahead.
So our plan is to gather some input from stakeholder groups and then bring some ideas to the board, and the board can add ideas, and then we'll weigh everything. There are some things that have been on every slide for probably the last 2 years, but the board hasn't made a decision about those, but they'll be in the consideration with everything else.
Okay. Then sorry, talking a lot, but whatever, it's the only thing on the agenda. I have something to add to the list
Yeah.
of considerations. I was at Pomalita Back to School Night, and I've been at Pomalita many times, but I think because I knew that the water leak had happened, I was paying a lot more attention to the physical plant than I have in the past. I was usually looking at educational programs when I go visit that school, and this time I was looking at the walls and because that was on my mind. And I know Tyler's brought this up before, and other people who spent more time at Pomalita than I did, but I was I was a little shocked at the state of the physical campus there. I hadn't realized that teachers have been for years having leaking ceilings as a matter of course. I just hadn't kind of put that together. I hadn't really looked at the walking up the steps and the paint job that clearly needs to happen, and so it was a combination of kind of maintenance stuff, and I understand these are teenagers, they don't keep a clean campus, but it really felt to me like, wow, it is time to put some money into Pomalita's physical plant. We've done so much nice work at the high school. We put a lot of money into Calpella recently, I remember, just out of sort of feeling badly for that site. Eagle Peak's a beautiful campus, Grace Hudson's a beautiful campus, our elementary schools are in pretty good shape, most of them. We've invested a lot of support coming up for South Valley. Maybe Nokomis needs some help too. I'll look at your plant next time I'm there, Mr. McCann. But I just felt like, wow, this school needs some help. So I wanted to add that to the list. I really was remiss in not noticing that teachers are in classrooms with a lot of dripping water from the ceilings.
And in October, remember, we'll have our facilities master plan workshop, and all of that will get captured in there as well.
And I'm sure it is. I remember the facilities master plan was beautiful, but we still have to decide what order we're going to work on.
Correct.
Right.
And I'd just like to piggyback on that the lack of air conditioning in the gym is deplorable. Okay.
Deplorable.
Gail.
Yeah, I made a promise to Brian. I think you keep hearing all this information about why you can or can't put air conditioning in there, and I just don't think that's possible. There must be a way. And I think when we're looking at spending money, to me, it's always really important to figure out the number of people who use a facility and for what periods of time, and you categorize it and prioritize it that way. And things like beautification, even some of the other schools could use a little.
Yeah.
I know at Calpella when we did the flower boxes, oh my God, we spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours, getting them built, and parents shouldn't have to do all that. It should be part of, because I think how a school looks to a parent is a really important thing. So I would think that when we have this one-time money, that I know we're going to look at the facilities master plan, but then I also think we always have to have that clear information about what is on deferred maintenance and what is on this and what is on that, because I walked around Nokomis a year ago, and I was shocked at the condition of the paint and everything. And I just think we need to spread that money out and do lovely things at all of our schools, and also safety issues, And, when we talk about things like, do we have enough bathrooms, or do we have facilities where kids can I know there was a thing on the Calpella list where the kindergartners could actually wash, there was a thing it was $17,000, but they would be able to wash their hands. When you try and get, 90 kids hands washed, they've missed their lunch, and we're so concerned about health and safety and everything. I just think we have to look at projects from that point of view. And I think we have to be very careful that our stakeholders are a broad group of people who represent not just a particular point of view, but, you know, if I were a stakeholder, I'd want to use some of that money to put an art building on every campus so teachers could have a place to bring their kids when we did art, you know. So I think we have to be sure that everybody's involved in this, not just a certain group.
We need a motion to approve the report on unaudited actuals.
I so move.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approving this report? Aye. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
You can just stay right on up there for the next one, too.
Yeah.
So this is about the first reading for grant funds?
This is the Federal Grant Funds Board Policy Update.
Oh, okay.
With the,
I was going to say, Deb can handle that.
I can do it if you want. This is related to procurement
Oh, right.
requirements. And so we are needing to update this administrative regulation, and we have to define what the word nominal value means. And that will help us be in compliance with the new regulation. So we are defining nominal value as no more than $20. So that is the first reading of this board, or this administrative regulation, and it'll come back at the next meeting for a final review.
Okay, any
Just putting it up here.
questions?
Thank you.
That doesn't include our pairs, does it?
All right. Next is the resolution for the Week of the School Administrators, October 8th through 14th.
Yes, and I am introducing this to the board. This resolution is being recommended to honor our amazing school site administrators for all the incredible work that they do. And so the Week of the School Administrator is October 8th through 14th in the state. And this resolution talks about all of the things that our school administrators do. I'm really appreciative of all of them. We're really lucky to have such a great team. And I'm also happy to report we only have two new administrators this year, so that's really great. But I appreciate their work. This resolution supports the amazing things that they do.
So we need a motion to declare the week of October 8th through 14th, the Week of the School Administrator.
I so move. I so move.
We have a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, school administrators.
All right. Next, we have Katie Summer up about mathematics placement report.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. So part of the board policy that we passed in the spring of 2016 was to have a mathematics placement process in place, and also that yearly we would review that information with the board.
Thank you. Yearly, we would review the information with the board, and tonight is this presentation. So, Deb, I'm not sure, do you want me to allow questions in between, or?
However you want to do
Okay,
it.
so we can do questions in between as you're going, if there's any questions on the slides. So the data we'll look at right now is from 16-17. Last year was our first start in this process, so we're getting into our cycle of our yearly reporting. So this is our 16-17, and we'll be coming back in February to report on 17-18.
And just for the audience and the board, I think you've seen this report. So some of the background information Katie probably won't spend much time on unless you have questions for her. She's going to focus mostly on the data itself, not the different pathways.
Right, correct. This slide talks about the differences between mathematics requirements in terms of graduation requirements. And you can see that it depends on looking at the district compared to what's required to get into a CSU and a UC. So we have a 2-year requirement, including algebra, and then CSUs and UCs have a 3-year, 4-year recommended for UCs. This diagram that you've seen before is our pathways, and this is showing, someone said that I like boxes, but it's really to try to describe and show what are our major pathways that we have. There are always students that take different pathways sometimes, but this is to describe our major pathways. And our goal is for students to be A through G ready, you have to get to Algebra 2. So you can see there are a couple pathways that get you past that. So we spent a lot of time working on getting our placement processes together in the 15-16 school year and then implementing those in 16-17. So our placement is based on 6 criteria. We start a pre-placement process in the spring looking at students' academic performance, their SBAC, the Smarter Balanced Assessment that all the students take in 7th grade, their teacher recommendation and parent and students' requests, and they get a pre-placement. And then we use data we give an assessment in April, sometimes late March. It kind of depends where the SBAC testing window is. We try not to push up too close to that. And then we look at their 8th grade Smarter Balanced Assessment scores. So we're looking at how are students transitioning from middle school into high school and how are we placing them in mathematics. And I'm not going to go through this, this basically shows it in a lot simpler form of what we're looking at in the first start of the process, the pre-placement, and then our initial placement. We use that information to verify. One of our, Ureli Macias and one of our math teachers has made this amazing spreadsheet where we send them the data early, but then they put this whole spreadsheet together, and for those last final steps, they actually have a numerical value and they look at it, and if there are any differences between what the projection based on this numerical value is, then they go and talk to the teachers or counselors at those schools and work on why is there a difference and work that out. So today we'll look at specifically, this is also information. This is just our timeline if you ever want to look at that in more detail, so you have that. But that just gives you a timeline that we start in late January, we start pulling it, but we start in February and we try to end the process it's really usually around June we get the finals. And then you can see that if a parent did or a student want to appeal that decision, they can appeal the decision of their placement. And as Gordon said, what we're really trying to do is get the right kid in the right class. So making sure that students are going to be successful. So the slides that you're going to see will be showing the percent of the subgroup that's enrolled in that course. And then red are areas that are of concern we want to take a look at in more depth. And then also the number of the students in the group is on the bottom. So some of our groups are small, and I'll point that out a little bit as we go, or smaller. So this is looking at our placement in math courses in 16-17. This is that first placement. And the reason we have you can see the different courses. You can see that we have 53% of our students placed in Algebra 1 or above. That's where we want students to be. That's that track that they can take 3 years of math by their junior year, have the A through G requirement, or if they have any bumps along the way, they have another year. But the big part is we really want to promote and hopefully our president can help with that, our student president, is that we really want to encourage students to take 4 years of math. That's one of the most important things. We don't, even though you could be finished your junior year, we want to encourage students to continue that because they have to take placement tests, and then it really helps with their transition into college or the workforce. So when we look at that, we would like that number to be higher. And we don't really, we'll have numbers this year, so we'll be able to start kind of looking that across the years in terms of number of students enrolled. Sure.
You have algebra 1 and then you have algebra 1 or above. Did you add
Oh.
to those?
So on this first slide, I wanted just to give you a picture that, so if you look at, we have 35% of the students placed in Algebra 1. We have 12% in geometry, 6% in Algebra 2, and 1% in trig. And those add up to 53% in Algebra 1 or above. And in the further slides, I don't break it down by the different groups because some of the subgroups get just kind of small in it. So the rest of the time, we'll see that Algebra 1 and above, which means those 4 courses.
Katie, what would a high-performing high school have in the Algebra 1 or above?
I haven't looked at other rates because it's not, that data is not readily available. But the sooner students can start on that path, the better that they're going to be able to.
No, I understand, but I don't know if realistically we're shooting for 60% or we're shooting for 80%.
It's a good question. We can go and ask.
Megan, you're wanting how to
Like a-
compare with like Santa Rosa, for example, or Windsor or other school districts in California?
I just don't know how bad we are, right? Like, I don't know whether to be like really worried or just be like, oh, we're doing pretty good. I mean, I have no idea.
Well, then you're really interested, aren't you, in more, I mean, like, how are the kids in Marin doing? Or-
I don't know. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how to evaluate. I just don't, I guess it would have to be a like district maybe, right? Demographically like, or I'm not sure.
We could look at demographically like, I think if you just look at it as a number, we would want more students.
I agree.
At that level, so we can always get better. But we can try to look at that. I don't know how we would, other than asking the district, we could ask, because I don't think that data is available statewide. When we look at our subgroups, so you can, if you look at this graph, you can see this is where we switched over to having Algebra 1 or above clumped together. And on the bottom, you can see the female population size is 226 and the male is 201. And what this is showing you is that percentage. And when you look at this, you can see that we have equity when we look at gender in terms of Algebra 1 and above. And part of that, although if you look at the pre-algebra, you can see it's a little bit different, but what happens is when you look at all 3 of those courses, they catch up and make that equal. So that was good to see, that students are at least being placed in there equally. So the next slide is showing not socioeconomically disadvantaged and socioeconomically disadvantaged. And you can see the group sizes below. What socioeconomically disadvantaged means, or what the definition of that is, those are students that are on free and reduced lunch, or it's also a combination, or their parent ed level is not a high school graduate. So you technically could not be on free and reduced, but your parents didn't graduate from high school, and then you would be in the socioeconomic. And so when we look at our numbers, you can see that. But our percentage is close to just our free and reduced numbers, so that's mostly what that is. So when we look at that, we can see we have a much higher rate of not socioeconomically disadvantaged, and compared to our socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so as we look through this a little bit, we can look at that. But right now, when we look at, that's one of our largest discrepancies. The next slide is showing I added one group in that's not really we don't normally report on multiple races, but I just added that in just to kind of show sizes of groups. But our major subgroups and that we normally report on are Hispanic, Latino, Native American, white, and then that multi-race is in there. And you can see the two largest subgroups are Hispanic, Latino, and white. Our Native American subgroup is 21, and our multiple race is 11. So that does give you an idea of the size. But when we look at that, we can see that only 19% of our Native American students are being placed in Algebra 1. 41% of Hispanic Latino. I have another slide. I'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the things we've noticed, although that placement for Native Americans is much lower than what we want, we've been looking at the A through G rates for our Native American subgroup, and that has been going up. So we feel like, at the end, we're getting the support that we need, but that is something we want to look at, especially this year when we look at our placement. But one of the things last year when we actually looked at our Smarter Balanced Assessment math scores, we noticed that was one of our lowest performing groups. So when those students transitioned to 9th grade, we sent the information to the counselor, what their scores were, what classes they were in, what students, to help them get support throughout the year in tutoring. And I don't have all the information. I can come back to you on how many of the students got into tutoring, but we offered a lot of tutoring last year, but we did specifically look at that group and try to provide some support because we were concerned about the scores.
It seems to me like, and that's a good place to begin, but we need to back that up a long way. We need to be making sure that our Native American students are doing well in math back in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, and then they will be in algebra when they're in 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, we have to start earlier.
Early. And that we have some more diving to do. One of our questions are, where do students, it's a little bit harder because some of our data doesn't go back as far, but where are there certain points at which they start to struggle? Or is it, starting from the beginning, or is there a certain area? When we look at our SBAC data, we see that 4th and 5th grade that's an area that we have low scores in mathematics, so that's something that we need to start looking at what's happening there. It's not just that subgroup, but it's in 4th and 5th grade. One of the things, just in terms of the Hispanic Latino group, that's one of our largest subgroups. We did a little bit more analysis to look at the language fluency of the students in those subgroups. And when we looked at students that were not English learners, their placement rate was 57%. And then when we looked at English learners, it was 16%. So that, and then you can see below, not English learners, English only, were 49%, and IFEP stands for, and I should have spelled that out, Initial Fluent English Proficient and Reclassified English Fluent Proficient, and they're at 60%. So when we look at that group, we know that our English learners are needing some support in mathematics because that's much lower than the other part of that group. And I have another slide to talk a little bit about that.
When that bottom group of the reclassified fluent English, that classification do you have any sense of when that would take place? It can take place as early as 4th grade, I know, but I don't know what the percentage is of when it takes.
So once in a while, we'll reclassify a kid in 1st grade, or a student, I should say, in 1st grade. We try not to do that too early, but sometimes there are students, and then the IFET means most of our students come early that initially they were fluent. Our goal is to have them reclassified by 5th grade, but we do have assessments in place and a process in place to reclassify 1st grade students, but we tend not to do too many because it's kind of hard to know. You really got to look at the data.
Because I know there's been some discussion when I used to translate for reclassification, and there was a whole issue about whether you should reclassify them by fifth for sure, because otherwise it limited their options in middle school in some way. That was a real concern on the part of parents.
So one of,
I wonder
and
if something like that can affect this.
yeah, one of the questions that we have on follow-up on this is, are there any barriers getting in the way of students being placed? So there are sometimes course-taking patterns that you'll see. So we want to, Ureli, Macias, and I talked about, we need to look a little bit more closely at that as well to get a little more information on what's happening there.
That we're 53% overall Algebra 1 or higher, and our IFEP or RFEP are 60%.
Correct.
So they're kind of exceeding the average of the district, which
Yes.
is something to celebrate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, if we look at our average, both our English-only Hispanic Latino subgroup and the IFEPs together are higher than the district average. And then when we look at based on language fluency, so blue is English learner, orange is English only, gray is reclassified, and yellow is initial fluent. You can see that it's kind of the same information, but it's including all races and ethnicities that our students that are reclassified are placed at a higher rate. So, and we can see, even though that subgroup is very small, the initial fluent students are a little bit higher, but we can see that our English-only students are about the same as our RFEP. So once students get the support enough that they can be reclassified, they're doing well in placement. So some of the follow-up questions that we'll be looking at are there any barriers preventing English learners from getting placed in Algebra 1? I know they work very hard on scheduling and making sure students are getting put in the right place, but we just want to look at, are there any structural, and then are there maybe any things we want to look at? What grade levels do students need the most support? Do we see a pattern where students' academic achievement is struggling in specific grades, and looking at that so we can provide some more support there. So those are some follow-up questions on that.
One thought on that, and maybe there's a placement test that you take before you go into to the high school math program, and I'm wondering if you guys have had a chance to review how are the kids doing in 8th grade math, so that when they matriculate to 9th grade, is the assessment test keeping them back, or are they doing great in 8th grade and then the assessment shifts them back, or is it something else?
So it's a good question. We haven't done a specific analysis of that. That question came up when I shared some data with other folks. We use multiple pieces of data though. So we're looking at both grades, teacher recommendation, smarter balanced assessment scores, and then this placement test.
So there isn't a priority put on the placement test?
Right, it's just one, it's one of the criteria that we look at. It's not like weighted more either.
And I think nice that you haven't gotten to this slide yet, but this slide, what we want to make sure is that we're placing kids appropriately. And what you look at for that one thing that you look at is, did they have to move to a different class? And only 31 or 7% of the freshmen last year had to move to a different class.
Moved down.
So, well, moved at all. So, and the slide details on where they moved. But that's a good sign. We want those numbers to be really low because we want our recommendations to be accurate. So they're pretty accurate, which is good.
And then one of the other questions is we really want to look at the English learners in that group. Do we have a large group of newcomers that are having, is that part of the placement barrier, or is this more of a long-term English learner? So we're going to analyze that group. It's about 83 students from last year. They'll be 10th graders this year. And then this is looking at our special ed, homeless, and foster youth. almost, I know we're reporting on that. The numbers are very small, you can see, but I did put them up there. But when we look at our homeless youth, there's about 31% are placed in Algebra 1. Our special ed, many times those students are placed in a specific math class. So just one area we thought we should take a little bit look, and we can look at those students as pretty easily, small subgroup. It's just, are there any ways we can support our homeless youth a little bit better in mathematics? So when we look at our overall analysis, 53% of our students are in Algebra 1 or higher. We don't have gaps between genders. Our RFEP and IFEP and EOs are placed at similar rates, but we do have discrepancies in the largest one in our low socioeconomic disadvantaged and Native American and English learner. So we want to look at that a little bit more as we drill down to look at, are there any things we can do to support those students? And then our last slide, so we've worked very hard on and coming up with our placement process and really working on trying to refine that. And when we look at how many students after placement moved, so sometimes, we'll put a student in a placement and we realize, okay, this isn't the right place. This does include any changes throughout the year. So this number catches any changes early and any ones after the semester. Because sometimes that will happen too, a student gets changed after the semester. We wanted to look at that as a whole. So if you look at the first of those 31, so that's 7%, we think that's pretty good, and we're hoping to look at those numbers again and have that even get a little tighter, because we've really worked hard on this process. I really want to thank Ureli Macias, who pulls all that together, and it's a lot of work for her to work on that scheduling, and she does a really good job. So when you look at the first 6 of the 31, those changes were made within special education, and many times that's in a class where they're in the same class, they have multiple classes going, and they're trying to figure out which group. And so the other 2 were from a sheltered math class into a non-sheltered math class. So same Algebra 1 class, but one was sheltered, and those 2 moved out. They didn't need the sheltered structure.
And sheltered for English learners, for those of you who don't know the term.
Sorry, we love using our words. And then the next 3 groups are groups that did go from from a higher course to a lower course. You can see we did have some movement from Algebra 1 to pre-algebra, or Algebra 1 to Algebra Essentials. We only had 3 changes from Algebra 2 to Algebra 1, and I think that shows that we've got the right students in there, because that's a very rigorous class. And then you can see, though, we had some students move from pre-algebra to Algebra 1, and from algebra to geometry, and then a special ed math class to Algebra Essentials. So we're working on, refining our system, and we do have a good system in place right now, I think, based on looking at the number of students that moved. And we'll be coming back with data from 17-18.
Just one last comment, and my understanding is that there isn't a real answer to this, but, and I only have a very small snapshot from my personal life. It's it's been a difficult transition to go from Algebra 1 to geometry and then back to algebra to that number 2. And my understanding from talking to my daughter's teacher is that apparently this has been flip-flopped and tried in all different directions. I just wonder if there are more students that go through anyways, I'm just wondering if it would serve more students to do Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and then geometry, as opposed to those that are going to trig, because I know that there's also difficulties if you have geometry between trig and algebra too.
Yeah, and we, I don't know if Gordon wants to speak to it anymore, but we did change, part of that was due to the change in requirements for A through G, where geometry did become required. And so waiting for that in the third year did not seem to be the right thing to do, because sometimes then students weren't taking the right course in their third year. So, Gordon, I don't know if you have any other input on why the staff at the high school changed that pathway. It is a more traditional pathway, but again, going from geometry to pre-calc or calc is also difficult.
Yeah. Lots of tears the first week, and it was, just needed to voice it.
Yeah. And it's, Algebra 2 is one of the most. Algebra 2 is a very rigorous course, and very abstract.
Megan? So, I'm sorry. I was just curious about calculus A and B and B and C. Is that one calculus class, or do we have two levels of calculus?
We do have 2 levels of calculus.
That is offered at the high school?
Correct, yeah.
Approximately how many students take that?
It's usually small, but we have 2 full sections this year. I know in the past, sometimes that class has been 2 classes in 1 class, but this year, I think
So this year we have 45 in AB and 31 in BC.
Well, that's exciting. I remember when Christiane came here and asked to do the 1 class for the first time, and he only had 11 students.
And they're small class sizes, but they're very, very, very difficult, and there's a lot of coaching that goes on.
Oh, yeah, no, but that's
And
not.
so those are very good numbers for the school size that we have.
Yeah.
Okay, Megan?
What is your plan based on this data? What are you going to do differently to increase the number of kids that are in Algebra 1 or above?
Well, so one of the things we want to do is look at what, we want to drill a little bit deeper. This is the first time we've really dived deep into our placement data. So of the groups that we looked at, we want to look at, one, are there, like I said before, are there areas where we see academic achievement dropping off, whether it's on state assessment or not, so that we can start looking at those grades, and then providing support to those students, so that they, during the school year, so that they can be more academically successful, because it's really most students in middle school. So when we see students that aren't going into Algebra 1, they've taken Math 8, which they should go into Algebra 1, but they haven't been strong enough to get into algebra. So what we're doing is we have a year in there where they're doing pre-algebra, and they're really focusing on those foundations in algebra that they need to be successful in Algebra 1. So really looking at how can we support those students in prior grades, and I think that's what we have to look at, is how can we help students earlier on so that they can be successful in Algebra 1. So we're going to look at our data a little more deeply, and look at, are there, where do we see some other patterns? Are there any other barriers? But it's really supporting the students in the classes. And I know we already do a lot of
What specifically does that
tutoring.
mean, supporting the students?
Like additional tutoring, or do we need to look at how the structure of the class, is there something we need to do in the class, like have more peer tutoring within the class, those kinds of structures that we could put in place to help support students. The demands in mathematics are much greater than they used to be. So one of the questions came up was, why are English learners, when usually that's a higher area of achievement, having a harder time? The demands of mathematics now have much more language in them in math and the assessments than they did before. So students are asked to be able to justify their reasoning. They're asked to, just even on the SBAC, look at 2 students' claims that they're making, and then they have to support why they think one student's correct and not. And in the past, we never had assessments like that. So the language demands in math, we're both saying, can they be fluent and just as good and procedural as we want them, but actually be able to be, act like mathematicians and use the math. And I think that's part of why we see that. So looking at, do we need to do some things in class to help students with that?
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
Sorry, just as a closing comment, I do think that we should remember to, when we do our LCAP this year, I don't feel like we invested a lot in math. Out of the top of my head, that's not what I feel like. So I might be wrong, but I'm thinking that we need to pay attention to that. I mean, we invest a lot in reading, we invest a lot in, support staff on site, but I don't remember a lot of specific investment in math, and it sounds like that's something we need to spend some time and money on.
I would just like to say I have been extremely impressed by the amount of tutoring that goes on in the math department. I went in a calculus class last night, and the teacher said that she's there every day after school until 5, and they're at noontime. And this has been the experience for the last 2 years there that I've witnessed, so I'm very impressed.
And at Pomalita too, and Eagle Peak, we have teachers that, through our Title I funds also, not just in our after-school program, but stay in and work on tutoring students as well.
Did we not, I thought there was some money for tutoring at the high school, but didn't you say last year there was a glitch that didn't really go well, no? Or did?
We have a lot too.
Okay, and so wouldn't that be a resource too for math?
Yeah.
As well,
Okay, thank you.
Katie, thank you to you and the staff for pulling all the data. I know it's not easy to pull, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and I want to thank Jackie Sherman too. I forgot to thank her because she pulled it all together out of Aries.
Do you want a break, or do you want to just go on? I think we don't have
We're
much.
almost done.
Yeah.
Almost,
We are
yes, okay. Okay, superintendent's report.
We had a good start to the school year, and, people are being extremely patient as we work through our transportation bumps. And again, if anyone knows any bus drivers or people who would like to become a bus driver, looking at the camera right now, please make sure and apply with us. We're starting some new training classes. So we appreciate the community's patience with us as we deal with the shortage of bus drivers. Our enrollment is up. I looked at this on Monday, where it is increased by about 52 this year across the district, and so that's a good and healthy sign. I'm not quite sure where we're going to put the kids eventually, because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've increased by about 300. So that's really great and healthy. I attended, I'm on the Association of California School Administrators Superintendents Council. So I was there today in Sacramento, and I heard one little glimpse of potential good news, Penny. It's not fantastic news, but it's good news, and I'll take it. They were talking about STRS and PERS returns, and they are better than they had projected. They were like in the double digits or something, and they were hoping that eventually that would be adjusted just by like 0.5%, which is not that much, but any little bit helps. So that was some good news that I'm hoping will help us. I also, this week, 3 of our principals are attending. We were invited to participate in a project through UC Davis, and it's a principal support network project. And so 3 of our principals are attending, and then I'm facilitating one of the groups, not our principals, but I was assigned the high school group, and Dr. Tom Maney is facilitating the cohort, and there are 25 principals from Northern California participating and about 35 in Southern California. Variety, there were 3 continuation high school principals, multiple elementary principals, about 6 high school principals, and maybe 5 middle school principals. And so they're working around a book called Leverage, and it's based on the premise that it really looks at what are the high-level strategies that produce great results in schools. And so specifically around professional learning communities. And they talked a lot about PLC Light, and then deep professional learning communities. So I feel really privileged to be able to attend to get that professional development. My wheels are already churning, and then 3 of our principals went as well.
Which principals are attending?
Dara Brown from Frank Zeke, and Chris Sweet from South Valley, and Christy Ped, UISA, and the adult school. They're looking at potentially replicating this project in other parts of the state. And so I'm hoping maybe they'll come here next year and we can have more of our schools participate. But it was a good couple of days. There are 6 sessions throughout this year. And each of the principals, they have an action plan that they have to complete in between the sessions. So it was great, very invigorating. And nice to be on a college campus for a couple of days with all those exciting young people. And let's see what else. It's back to school night season, and I know several of you have gone to back to school nights, and it's just been great seeing the enthusiasm of our staff. And they're really excited about their work. Yep. So thank you all for attending back to school nights. I think that's it.
Okay, about board members, do you have anything to report? Tyler?
Very briefly, I worked on the facilities master's plan, and it was interesting at back to school night at Pomlita that I sat in one of the old school desks where the chair is attached to the desk, and it was like being tortured for various reasons, but it was a very hard chair. The next class happened to be an English class where they have the new fidget chairs, the new desks, and it kind of made me, it was very comfortable, the chair was, but it made me a little crazy thinking about 24 kids or 30 kids bobbing back and forth. So I mentioned it to the teacher, and she said, it's amazing, it doesn't bother me, and the kids don't do laps around the classroom anymore. She said the tables were fabulous. Ends up that it's one of my daughter's favorite classes, but it was very interesting. It sounds very expensive. If I remember correctly, it was like $24,000 a classroom to update them to the new furniture, but it's something that we're going to have to look at with the facilities master plan. It was very interesting to see the teacher's reaction and how comfortable the chairs were.
The high school.
Fernandez.
I went to the Blue Zones presentation. People familiar with the Blue Zones, the healthy, long living? It's the National Geographic did a study where they looked at places in the world where people live the longest, and there were like 6 of them, and then they looked at those communities and came up with 9 sort of commonalities, and now they're trying to replicate those so that you are a blue zone, because you live longer, but you also have way less chronic disease, including like obesity, and you live longer and you live better. So Ukiah, the hospital, has brought them here to sort of look at our community to see if we might be a possibility. And I went to the presentation, which was interesting. Then they had a school focus group that I went to that I thought they were going to give us information, but they didn't. It was basically asking about our schools, and there was a couple people from MCOE and some charter schools and St. Mary's asking what we have in place already. So I did get a flyer for you, but it was interesting. It'd be interesting if it happens.
Thank you for going.
I
Sure
thought
you
about it.
We did. Gail?
I just want to say that I was delighted to meet the music instructor at Pomalita. I was exhausted after talking to him. I have never seen such a high-energy person in my entire life. I crawled out of his room. But there were 2 or 3 parents there afterwards, and one of them said, well, you know, I understand that you have 54 students in the class. And I thought, oh, God, you know. And he said, yes, I do. And she said, I just wanted to tell you I'm in awe of you. I can't even imagine directing 54 students. And she repeated it 3 or 4 times, and 3 of the parents joined in. Just reminded me that it's just so nice when parents express their appreciation to a teacher and let them know. And, you know, we should encourage parents to do that when we send out little things. You know, have you paid a compliment to your child's teacher today? And so it was fun.
Well, I have to just share briefly, I just finished writing this last article, which some of you know is not my favorite thing to do. But I have to say that this was the most rewarding exercise I've done since I've been on the board. This particular one, I decided to go and talk to new teachers. And I talked to 11 of them. I wish I could have made it to more. And just had so much encouragement about their enthusiasm and how they feel about our district and the support they've received. It was really fabulous. And my regret was I wanted to write about each person, you know, and my first draft was 1,180 something words, and you can only have 700 words. So it was very difficult to pare down, and then I just had to throw the whole thing out after the 4th draft. I threw the whole thing out and just had to do a composite. So the article does not at all relate the experience that I had. So, just wanted to pass that along.
That's great.
B.
That's encouraging.
Well, you reminded me saying that, that's been one of the really fun things about doing the open houses is how enthusiastic so many of the teachers are, especially at Eagle Peak. There's a lot, with the new program, and there were so many parents, and so many of the teachers were just so excited about what they were doing, and they wanted to show everything, and it was really nice. I haven't seen them as excited in a long time, so it's really nice.
Right. A lot of enthusiasm here. We just have to keep it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we have an item to report about. This is a readmission, and we need a motion to deny the readmission of student AA 09142017 at this time, and to review this request at the end of the fall of the fall 2017 semester.
I so move.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, and then we need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I so move.
I second with a request. On item H27, we're approving a consulting agreement with College Success Services for 4 courses for parent engagement. No, I'd be interested in a report on how many attended. It's a $22,000 contract for 4 hours. So I'm interested in the participation after the fact. So that doesn't need to come back to in any form you want to share that information with us. I'd be interested.
Just in a TGI.
However, yeah. Okay, thanks.
I just also had a comment on that struck me, and it did have to take all their expenses out, but we're buying the curriculum. Oh, okay, but Is it meant to have parents, it seemed to me like a high school program, and I'm wondering if it really is geared toward getting parents involved from kindergarten on at the very early ages.
We're using the program just this year at the high school, but we will be expanding it.
Okay.
But it does come, we're in essence buying the curriculum, so we can deliver it in the future ourselves.
Mhm. And I just was curious, when they do English and Spanish simultaneously, I hope they do it in different rooms,
I think,
because if not, you're only getting half of the, if you're limiting it to a certain number of minutes. I'm just, from past experience, it's hard. That's
Separate
all.
rooms, it is in separate rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so did we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
We did, and there is a second.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next we need to talk about planning. We have some dates for, who would like to attend that?
Just look at my calendar. I haven't done it in a while, so I think it's my turn.
Okay, Gail,
May as well fill the whole week up.
anyone else want to attend October 3rd?
Oh, well, I'll do it if nobody else is gonna do it.
I just did it.
Okay, so B and Gail,
Is that the same day?
When is our, we have a meeting now?
What about Ann?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Is
Yeah.
that 5?
She did?
Five is, I think, I think 5 to 7.
Yeah. Okay.
October
We're ready
3rd?
to do an SBAC test too.
Oh, boy, it's gonna be fun.
In your
So,
skills.
so it's me, you guys?
Yes,
It's me? Okay.
yes. Okay, anything that a board member wants to bring up for future consideration?
I just want to know what we're going to do when we get to 9%. Is Penny going to throw a little party for us or something?
Penny's gonna be so happy. She's
I
gonna stay for
know.
10 more years when we get to
Just want to see the look on her face when we get
In
there.
terms of an item for the future,
Uh-huh.
I know this is an issue that only Tyler and I care super deeply about, but I do think that there was some sort of suggestion of a report around typing.
Yes.
I can't, typing, we won't stop talking about it, Katie,
I
so.
agree with you guys. There's 3 of us.
I couldn't remember if we were,
It's not just 2 of you.
It's
Okay.
4.
Oh, good. It's not
I
just-
think it's everybody.
I just
yeah.
couldn't remember if we were having a board report or what the follow-up was last time we talked about typing.
I put it in a Friday communication about what our plan was for this year.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Did I not?
You do remember? Yeah.
Do any of us remember it?
I don't remember it.
It was really a great,
It was someone. Now you forgot?
we're starting in 2nd grade.
Specifically doing what?
10 to 15 minutes a week, and we were trying to see if we do it,
Do you want this on an agenda item or just more detail in a?
I guess if you sent a report that none of us remember, maybe you could resend it?
It's not a lengthy report, it's just what is our plan for this year?
Well, then how about a little report on it? So that way
You should
we,
probably send us questions, because I don't know what more to say except what our plan is and
okay,
how
well, your plan is,
frequently
when will it start and
It
the
has
amount of
started.
time?
And how is it monitored that it's actually
Right.
happening? Would be a question.
And so if it's starting in 2nd grade, what's happening, will happen in
So
3rd
can you
grade?
send us some questions so we can generate a report for the board?
So perhaps we can start by, if Debbie could resend whatever the typing, even if it was a few sentences that none of us remember, none of us read it, start there, and then we can respond with questions? Is that okay?
Yes.
Sounds like a good plan.
And there will not be a Friday communication tomorrow, Debbie's out for the town, so.
Okay.
If something urgent comes up, I will email.
And then we were gonna have something from the transportation department once the new gentleman was on.
Yeah, I would like to give him a little bit of time to get grounded.
Okay.
And then
I gave him 2 hours and you got really iffy because I asked a question.
I think we put
Do we have a motion to adjourn before 9 o'clock?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.